Well, as I mentioned earlier on in the show, 3.8 million working age Canadians self-identified as disabled in 2012. That works out to 13.7% of our population. And although there is far more awareness of those in our community living with a disability, my guests would agree that there is still a long way to go. Joining me today to talk about this is Pam Ferguson, author of In Her Own Special Voice, the story of Pam's sister Wendy, who was born with cerebral palsy, which has left her nonverbal. Jamila Gamble is an educator and the host of A Voice for All, a Rogers television cable show that focuses on disability awareness, and Rachel Esdale. She's an author, a filmmaker, and was born with cerebral palsy. Welcome to you, ladies.
Hi.
I am so excited to have this conversation.
It's great to be here after 8 years.
I know. So you were on Full Circle 8 years
ago.
8 years ago.
I was 25.
Welcome back, Rachel. You know, this all started with my conversation with Jamila. I met Jamila a couple weeks ago, and she said, you know, one thing we don't talk enough about are still these stigmas that are in our society. And then, you know, when we reached out to you, Rachel, you echoed this as well. So I want to start with you, Rachel. What are some of the stigmas that you still struggle with as someone who has cerebral palsy?
Well, people not seeing me for me. Like, they would see me for, like, she has a disability and she's in a wheelchair, but sometimes people that know me see me for me, but people that don't know me still have this perception that, oh, she's in a wheelchair, she's not able to speak or do anything, but that's changing for me.
How is it changing?
It's changing because I'm speaking out a bit more. So as I speak out a bit more, it's changing that way. People are becoming more aware.
I'm going to talk about your credentials later because I think that speaks to the fact that, you, as you said, there's so much that you can offer. Yeah. But I want to hear from you as well, Pam, because you know you've told Wendy's story, and Wendy is nonverbal, but she's also struggled as well with this perception that she has nothing to offer, especially because she can't speak. So people look past her sometimes.
That's right. I think our natural inclination is just to see a disability first, or a chair first, or a cane, or a walker, or whatever device people need to use. And so we tend to categorize it, we filter it through that. Instead of one person seeing another person and giving them the autonomy to say, you know, before you judge me on what you think I can do, get to know me a bit, and so then you can see what I'm capable of. And it's harder when we can't, you know, it's a bit scary to try to, what we don't understand and explain it and to kind of feel comfortable. But usually people like Rachel and people like Wendy make you feel very comfortable right away, and they would welcome people to just sort of get to know them a bit better, and so to give them that space to be who they are.
And that's really what's urged you to become an advocate, hasn't it, Jamila? Just this frustration as you work with students who have disabilities, challenges, is just seeing how our society is not very welcoming.
But I'm working on that, and I think when we have discussions like this is where it begins, right? People have questions, people have fears, but when we have Rachel and Pam, advocates, family members, speaking out, educators like myself, that's how we get that discussion going, and it answers some of those questions that people have.
So what is that discussion? How does that discussion start?
Well, it starts by asking. You know, I've worked with a lot of families and students, and even when I do public speaking as well, people always ask me, you know, why do you do this? Why do you support people with disabilities? You don't have a disability. And I always say you don't have to have a disability or a connection to someone to care. Yeah. You have to be a human. You have to have a heart. I have those two things, and this is what I was blessed to do, is to not speak on behalf, but to amplify voices of people who don't always get the opportunity to share their stories.
Rachel, you have a bachelor's in religious education, and one thing that really resonated with me, you sent us a voice memo, and you said, you know, here I am with this education, this degree, and I want to be seen as somebody who has so many gifts and talents, it's even even in my church community, that I can pray with somebody, that I can minister. And sometimes that's a challenge, isn't it?
Sometimes that is a challenge, but I have to say, my particular church, Kingsway Community Life Center.
Shout out,
in
yes.
Toronto. Hi, Pastor Brown. Is really, really welcoming. They actually really welcome me, so much so that they have a person there to help me every week to get my coat off,
Wow.
to do little things like that, to get my snacks, to help me down the elevator. And it's just been so awesome. And last week at Bible study, my friend Sarah, who is hearing impaired, she actually taught Bible study.
Wow.
So it is changing.
Good.
It is changing. It is changing, but it needs to be more so. But this is a start. Discussions like this and things like this. The more we do it, the more it'll change. The more you give a voice to something, the more it brings light to it. And light takes it out of the darkness.
That's right.
Yeah, well said. One thing that we've talked about is the healing factor. That, you know, and we're speaking in a faith realm as well. That some people will look at Wendy, they'll look at Rachel and say, all I see is somebody who needs healing. And that's a stigma as well that needs to be broken. Speak into that a little bit more, Pam.
Well, it's certainly when you grow up, so not to give away any ages, but in the early 70s was when a big sweeping movement came in about, you know, everyone needed to look the same. And everybody needed to have the same outward perfection. And, you know, the fact of the matter is God looks at the heart. And so the outward part, yes, wouldn't we all love to be able to have a pain-free existence? Wouldn't we all love to be able to move freely and to speak freely? But the truth is that God sees our heart condition. And so what I found with people with Wendy is that they would kind of judge her situation and who she was, her soul, based on what she looked like on the outside, when that was so far from the truth, and she had such a deep faith and a deep relationship with God that that needed to be represented. It meant she had greater faith almost walking through this. And you have to have a great amount of grace to, you know, people want to make it better. And this is what we run with. You don't always understand, but God is really gracious. And I think that as we get to know people as they are, the faith arises for each individual in that moment. And when there is that moment to pray in faith, absolutely. And healing does happen. And we believe in a God that is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So healing is there. And God just plants that seed of faith in everyone's heart. And but sometimes that comes out in the physical realm a little bit differently for everyone.
Yeah. What I'm also hearing too is that we've maybe gotten a little bit better when it comes to accessibility in buildings. I know that's still a struggle in some cities, but we're looking deeper. Like, it's not just having a ramp to your church. It's not just having an elevator, but it's a cultural shift as well, Jamila. And tell me, you've actually been asked to come into some churches and just observe how things can change.
Yes, so my mom attends a Chinese church in Brampton, shout outs. And they had a new family coming in who their son has autism, and they did the best thing. They asked, what do we need to do? How can we better accommodate this boy and his family? Show us, help us. And I was so proud of them for taking that step, because that's where it begins. And when I came in, I said, you know what? You are off to a fantastic start. Let's all just continue to come together, be supportive of this family, show him the way, let him show us the way as well, because it is a two-way learning opportunity. But I always say that you could have a ramp, you could have an accessible washroom, but if your attitude is not accessible, your whole foundation is not accessible. Yeah. So I'm really proud of organizations who are making that step, asking those questions, bringing people like myself in to start that discussion and help them along their way.
The Bible says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So what is the mind of Christ in relates to in relation to people with disabilities? That's what we need to ask ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great question, Rachel. When we talk about shifting our minds, and I think that's a great term that Jamila used, how do you see that happening, Rachel? What are some of the first steps that we need to do in order to shift that mindset?
I think we just need to talk, and not only leaders and pastors and people with disabilities, but the person with the disability needs to come to their leader and say, look, this is what I need, this is how I feel. Because a lot of people with disabilities struggle in the dark. They go home and they cry, and they don't say to their leaders, look, I'm hurting, look, I need help, look, I need this. But how are they supposed to know unless you tell them, unless your caregivers tell them? We need to start talking, and we need to not be ashamed of what we need.
And also we need a listening ear. We need also a community that's willing to listen.
Yeah.
Have you found that at all, Pam?
I think that is absolutely true. And as long as we're doing shout outs, Bethel Gospel
Go ahead.
Tabernacle is, we'll all get our churches in there. But I think that even just something as simple as changing the dialogue we use. So if you
Yes.
walk into a worship service and the minister says, let's all stand and raise our hand and sing. Well, my sister can do none of those things. So if we just change dialogue to say, if you can stand, great, join us and stand. If you can't, sing with all of your heart. Make whatever noise you make to God, make it joyful, make it a sound. Because inclusion is not that difficult, even just in a tweak of the language of it. We include everyone then, even the people who have had strokes in your congregation, the people who, it's not a disability like this, but they've somehow ended up that they can't be a part of what they used to, but they desperately need to be there on Sunday. They need to be at the feet of Jesus. They need to be worshiping just like everyone else, and hurting and needs met and prayed for and be seen as the whole person that they are. And when we change our dialogue to be just thoughtful and say, how do I include all these people with wheels? How do I get them on a platform? How do I get them ushering, for example? How do I get them praying for the sick or handing out communion? Whatever that looks like. It's just, I think, simple little shifts. We're almost there. It's certainly not in a horrible long way to come, but the dialogue certainly is happening.
It's good to hear that you feel that we're almost there.
Oh yeah, well, we're making
much
strides.
farther
right.
than we have been.
All right, this has been good. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today and having such an important conversation. And thank you for that challenge, Jamila. I'm glad that
glad
we
you
were able to
accepted
do
it.
it. You know, I love to accept a good challenge.